Beauty is so glorified as a metric for meritocracy that by this point it does not justify assessment on one's perception regarding someone. Two models from proposition right off the bat. A will be proving the significance of these immutable aspects that will be weighed in the definition of beauty, and B, even if there are changeable aspects in the aspect of beauty, it is still so difficult to prove. If we prove to you these 2 points, we win this debate. To mechanize our model, we'll decentralize the influence of beauty on people's assessment by getting into the root of the problem. Human instinct, which is essentially being drawn to the thing in front of you. This time, people think twice. To put this into visualization, I think a debater is impressive, but I don't immediately have the initial view that they're an angel or subjecting myself to a halo effect and mostly procuring a mostly neutral until proven viewpoint, which only exists on our side simply because we don't idolize these people right off the bat, maybe based off experience or maybe based off appearance. Or, for example, if I view a certain artist in a concert, I immediately have a halo effect, right? Point of framing then. The metric for beauty is mainly on aesthetics, right? Therefore, it proves a split in someone's characteristics. For example, you'd see someone as elegant based on their appearance and certain aspects of their character, right? Maybe it be some notes in their voice, their personality, etc., right? This is proves that this is a symmetrical subjective metric, and the goal of this debate is to prove why the influence of beauty, being decentralized, will procure significantly more benefits as opposed to the status quo. Points of characterization then. What does assessing people based on beauty look like, right? This motion mostly, but not limited to, applies on first impression or mundane interactions, right? When you're meeting someone on the go, based on their appearance, you're likely to judge their character, right? And two, how does this affecting looks like on our side of the house, right? This manifests in how people are drawn to those who are conventionally beautiful. This is a human instinct that someone is more likely to be attracted to someone who is more attractive to them, right? To put this into visualization, look at how celebrities are seen in the status quo as idols, right? Producing this halo effect, regardless if someone knows them deeply or not, which proves the credibility on our side of the house. Before moving on to my arguments, any POIs? Okay, moving on to my first argument then on why there is a birth lottery on these immutable aspects, because they are still being weighed to value beauty, right? First, three layers to this. First layer then, the mere idea that some immutable aspects are part of beauty is enough to deem it as unjustifiable. Therefore, remember that no one consents to being born. Nobody has an agency towards how they look when they are born. So even if opposition tries to argue that there are changeable aspects, they cannot disregard this aspect is still being used to determine someone's aesthetic value, right? To determine beauty. So this assessment still exists systematically or symmetrically on both sides of the house, but now not driven specifically on first impressions, right? This already correlates to my preemptive on how I don't want to hear arguments regarding how easy it is to change someone's aspects later on my second argument. POI then.
What's the actually December look like in your side of the house, and how are you going to look and assess their first impression through intangible aspect like personality, etc.?
I already explained that. Unfortunately, you did not listen. On my mechanization earlier, I already explained that it would be seen as having a more neutral point the moment you see someone, the moment you see your idol. You're not going to immediately have this halo effect on them. You're going to think more neutrally. Is this person good based on their behavior and whatnot? Therefore, you are not subjecting them to this immediate feeling of clarity in beauty, right? Second layer then. Second layer then on my first argument, principally, you do not have the epistemic access to assume the motives of people acting the way they do. For example, someone might see adjudicators as aggressive because for example, they are loud when giving their oral adjudication, right? No, this already implies that they have a motive on why they act aggressive, whether it be their peer influence, how they behave to their kids or how they behave to their family and whatnot. And why is this exactly important? Why exactly is this important? Is that because it justifies the discrimination in the current status quo, right? For example, some certain minorities people see as aggressive specifically because specifically because of these immutable aspects that they are viewed upon, regardless if opposition tries to characterize beauty as something that is an aspect that they can change, right? Okay, second argument then. Why, even if proposition says changing yourself is possible, it is very, very difficult and improbable. First, three layers to this. First layer then, remember that even then, your somewhat changeable aspects are so difficult to change. Like for example, I can be coached in debating, but that won't change some of my quote-unquote changeable aspects according to them, right? Whether it be how I express my tone, my manner, my style. Sure, my perception on matter increases, or like my general knowledge on the world increases, but especially in first impressions, or just generally, it is so difficult to achieve on one changing yourself, right? Second layer then. Society expects you to change, but remember, I already says that it is difficult to change yourself. For example, women have to continuously apply makeup to be defined as beautiful. They have to continuously go to to apply their skincare and whatnot. Or at the most extreme case, cater because they are not deemed in beautiful as the most vulnerable actor in this as the most vulnerable actor in this debate is those who are just trying to get on with their lives. Plastic surgery, right? What are the structural impacts of this, right? People who are considered not beautiful or just your regular people are denied certain opportunities because in the status quo, pretty privilege exists, right? That would still be only given to beautiful people. And this is already proving that the process of changing yourself is not only so difficult, it also does not guarantee, especially if first impressions are one of the main metrics of this debate, right? Third layer then, the counterfactual, if you don't change yourself, is that you'll be seen as brash, aggressive, uncared for. Let's talk about scenarios then. In the setting that we characterize, opposition probably wouldn't allow the changeable aspects in someone to be seen, even if it is applicable, because it is set in the first impression, right? Which moves us on to my ultimate conclusion. Why the second layer and third layer is so important, right? Society justifies bullying of these people by inserting that these normal, regular, non-beautiful people are excuses to justify beauty standards. We're not bullying them because they're ugly. For example, to put this into visualization, someone can put up an excuse. We're not bullying them because they're ugly. We're bullying them because they're rude. But that rudeness is still subjective. What if that rudeness is like an adjudicator giving you away, or your coach getting mad at you for example, not adhering to their guidance? In which case, I think our side's path to victory is clear. Please propose this motion.
Thank you, First Prof, for that back remark. I'll call the first opposition to the case law. Okay.
Is there a timer? I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. The narrative of beauty privilege has been prevalent throughout the bench of the proposition, in which they try to depict of beautiful people of having the most benefits of the assessment of using beauty as a centered adjective to assess people. Now, a few rebuttals of the previous case. Firstly, the birth lottery. Of course, people who are born don't consent to how they look and all of that. Now, firstly, we must understand the existence of these beauty standards and also acts as a deterrent of these beautiful people to actually
to actually show how they actually act. It actually keeps as a control to how these beautiful people actually will do, because you don't want a bad stigma when you're beautiful, because this also affects the beautiful people too. Of course, when people who are beautiful do something bad, they will also get criticized for that. Criticization still exists as a way of check and balance in our side of the house. Now, even if it's possible to change, there's second argument of the changing of aspects that you can change and the effects it has. We must understand that, of course, people want to prove the societal construct of beauty, which are, they themselves say, objective. We must understand the subjectivity of these um, of these remarks have to be substantiated through acts in order to actually prove them wrong, or even to change your actual perspective of these people. Now, when the status quo currently is, we're not the status quo currently is people assessing people's first impression through beauty standards and beauty and etc. and all that. Now, we must understand why people do this. First of all, humans are naturally self-conscious. We like to judge ourselves less than we judge other people. With this in mind, we have to understand of the creation of this is to make sure that we don't act like certain people, or maybe we want to act like certain people too. Now, this leads us to characterization of beauty. Now, firstly, we characterize beauty as being subjective. While it is mainly physical, we also consist to it being a spectrum in which people have different values of beauty, and etc. and all that. Now, why exactly is hindering this narrative actually prevents people from expressing their own mind? Because you have to understand that this is a personal opinion of someone that actually creates people who are hypocrites on their side of the house, because now people can actively say what they want to say and have to keep it in mind later. We have to understand that people who are objectively we must understand that objectivity and rationality exist on both sides of the house through the parameters provided from the beforehand. We must understand that rationality exists on both sides of the house, but it'll actually even worse from their side of the house, because now they're only because one of the main focus of the assessment is now removed and now focused on something else. Using their own example of judges, for example, of people assessing them from how they're mean, how the tone reacts. That's already proving how irrational people can be, and added on to, oh, he did something bad once, he'll probably do it again. That already increases the irrationality existing on their side of the house. Now, we must understand of why exactly the existence of this act as a deterrent only exists on our side of the house and is only exclusive. Firstly, we want people to be this deterrence make people be self-aware of their actions and be more responsible through what their acts might inflict on them through the other people, because we have to understand that humans are social creatures in which we act as a group, and we change depending on how our group perceives us, in which if you're good looking, if you are beautiful, you wouldn't want to act bad, you wouldn't want to be seen in your own group as a liability. No.
In comparison to people who are not categorized as beautiful in the status quo, it still implies that people are more inclined to defend those who are beautiful. Example, an idol gets criticized by the fan and they still get berated. How can you answer that?
Now, we've already seen that. We've already seen the cases of artists being defended even though they've done something wrong. But that's not the whole world, is it? That's not the entire picture that they're trying to frame here. We must understand there are still rational actors on our side of the house. It's not entirely. We still have judges. We still have high houses of the court. Still have rational people that don't just focus based on looks, and from whatever they said, regarding artists doing something wrong and still getting defended, we believe justice still exists on our side of the house because rational actors still exist on both sides of the house, with or without the framing, with or without the existence of this narrative of beauty being the central of assessing people. Now, if we're trying to focus on the problem of not being objective, we believe we've already told you through irrationality exists on both sides of the house, and how it's actually worse on their side because they're removing one of the main aspects of assessment. Secondly, how exactly is this deterrent help us actually assess people better through their acts? Now, we must understand that assessment of people happens every day through interactions, first impression, and etc. What they've said also. But one of the things we want to say that this narrative is not permanent. People change. How people perceive things change. First impressions don't deter everything, and this narrative is only kept inside your own head. You don't actively act upon what you think it is, because more likely it'll be an intrusive thought that won't be of matter to actual things that you'll do, like such as rating, judging people, or judging people on court, or any of that. Because rationality exists. Rationality is one of the things we cater to, and even with the existence of this, rational actors still exist on our side of the house because that's the status quo. When they're changing this, you have to remove one of the assessment, and would actively have to change the whole system of assessment of people's assessment through other means other than looks, which will now not be the central. They'll also lose the logic of the first thing you see, the first thing you do when the first thing you get of a first impression is, firstly, you look at them. Simply, would you trust your own senses? Because people have their own standards. We don't have the capability to always know how people act behind closed door, how people say certain things, and how people do, and what people do in their spare time. We don't have the capability of understanding. One of the first things we have and we understand is the sense that we have, the senses that we use. One of which being sight. We are able to see someone, and we're able to see how aesthetic looks like. Proud to propose.
Thank you, First Ops, for that speech. Now, continuing the Pops case in 20 Pops here.
Am I audible?
Try again.
Am I audible?
Okay.
Okay. Trigger warning before I start my speech because I'm going to be talking about some physical characteristics. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In opposition, you allow people to be blinded by simply one look at someone, whether they're pretty or not, determines if they are worth your time, and it determines if they're a good person. Exactly in your side, you will exactly prioritize the physical characteristics of someone, right? Don't try to run away from your burden by saying that suddenly in your side you wouldn't prioritize like beauty and physical characteristics. They try to co-opt our benefit on this. But then, 2 pieces of framing at the top of my speech. Firstly, what does like beauty look like? We think that the most common and the most proximate beauty that you see in status quo is physical beauty, right? Because it's the first thing that you see when you see someone. You see like their face, and you see like their whole body and stuff like that. You don't really like see their personality and etc., right? And so we think that exactly when you exactly are not talking to them yet, and when you're not interacting with them yet, it is unjustified for you to like give an assessment and to think a certain way about them because you haven't even like known their personality and etc. But then secondly, what does this really look like in mainstream media? We think that even like K-pop idols and models, there are people who are like painted as young. There are people who have to look a certain way and present themselves a certain way, and this is harmful to even like a spectrum of people, not only young people but also old people who probably have physical limitations and don't look that young anymore comparatively, right? And so we think that on your side the scale of impact will be very large. But then They try to tell you that in their side, apparently people will be more responsible of actions. We've already told you since PM that exactly this is contradictory because in your side of the house, people can get away with pretty privilege. The fact that people have the halo effect. If they are beautiful, then that means they have to be kind. That means they have to be smart because people just assume things based on their physical characteristics. So in your side, actually, people don't have to be that responsible of their actions because they will get away with a lot of things. I'm going to explain this later in my extension. But then secondly, I think they cannot just cop the benefit about how, like, in their side, they will, like, prioritize beauty of actions merely. Because firstly, we told you that the most proximate beauty that you see is physical beauty. But also secondly, even in our side, beauty of actions is still considered because it's just one of the metrics, and actually we prioritize meritocracy even more. And so then, moving on to the 3 contributions in my speech. Firstly, on principle, is beauty justified as the main metric of people's assessment? Secondly, on practical, on systematical issues, how beauty affects the workings of society? And thirdly, I'm going to run a new substantive on how the emphasis of beauty harms even people who are considered beautiful. Moving on then to my first issue on is beauty justified as a main metric? What did they tell you? They told you that birth lottery is justified because it acts as a check and balance because you don't want to impose certain biases on yourself. I don't think this is like a sufficient response, right? And so then, 4 responses to this. Firstly, I think the fact that like you still haven't mitigated the harms of birth lottery, people cannot decide what characteristics they want to be born into. But then secondly, the only opt-out mechanism in your side is the fact that like skincare, makeup, and plastic surgery, and the like only like significant change that you can really make is plastic surgery, right? We already told you in PM on how this is only accessible for rich people. And so even if people can change the characteristics in your side, it only benefits those who are already privileged in the very first place. You put the most vulnerable people, those who don't have capital and probably still need to prioritize other things, in a more vulnerable position in your side. But then thirdly, I think even if these rich people are able to change their characteristics, it is still unjustified because firstly, the gravity of your actions is irreversible, right? The fact that you change your nose, for example, you won't be able to get your original nose again. But then secondly, I think they make this choice on a heightened state of emotions. This means that they're not that rational. This means that they're affected by, for example, for example, their aunties or grandmas or grandpas who told them that their face looks weird or they gain some weight, for example. And so we think that they are in a heightened state of emotions. They're emotional and they're sad because people are commenting on their looks, right? But then lastly, I think when you allow cosmetic and skincare industry to capitalize on an insecurity that they themselves propagate, you're going to create an environment where exactly these cosmetic and skincare industry, for example, they will constantly create advertisement and propaganda that require you to even more pay attention to the beauty of people, when in reality you're only going to create this vicious cycle, right? And so all of those reasons, I think that on scale of impact, in your side, you're going to harm so much people, and even those who are like very, very young and still very vulnerable, right? But then, moving on to my second issue on practical, on how it affects the inner workings of society. They try to tell you that, first impressions of people are temporary and they change, and I think they try to tell you that it is justified for first impressions so that people can say what they want to say. 2 responses to this. Firstly, on the general society and also even the law system, right? We think that when in your side of the house, you look at the physical characteristics of someone, you're going to justify, for example, discrimination of certain races and what it means to have certain characteristics. The fact that in mainstream media, even police officers and also villains in Western movies have a dark skin tone or a certain characteristic, for instance. This means that, in status quo, we already see an active discrimination, an active metric of what beauty should be, and it only benefits, for example, white people or people of certain races who are privileged and who already quote-unquote won in the birth lottery, right? But then secondly, I think this looks like, for example, the Amber Heard case. The fact that just because she's pretty, people think that, she should be nice. I don't think she really did this crime, but in reality she did. But people gave her the benefit of the doubt just because she was pretty, right? And so I think this just illustrates to you how even if the first impression of people change, people still have entrenched biases that inherently makes the vulnerable people even more harmed. But then secondly, my PM has told you that people are even denied opportunities in status quo, and the fact that meritocracy is put in the back burner in status quo. What does this look like? I think your physical characteristics are contingent on daily interactions and interviews. Even the fact that you get the job, for example, is contingent on how pretty you are, because for example, like the interviewer likes seeing your face and they're enjoying like spending time with you, for example. Before moving on to my extension, is there any POI? Okay. Now I'm going to talk about how the emphasis of beauty harms even people who are considered beautiful. The premise of this is pretty straightforward. Physical characteristics is something that you're born with. This is to say that all the benefits that pretty privilege grants you is like felt since you were young, right? Why is this bad then? 3 pieces of analysis. Firstly, pretty people are used to getting privilege wherever they go. This looks like as long as you're good looking, you will be forgiven, you can get out of situations, and so they attach beauty as a metric that they can get away with. As long as they have beauty, they are safe. So then secondly, when you get older, I think like humans biologically will deteriorate and they will get older, right? You get pimples, for example, your metabolism slows down and you get fat in certain areas, for instance. You're going to grow self-hatred. You're going to grow like, oh my god, I'm losing my beauty, what am I going to do? So then thirdly, when they were younger and they only depend on beauty to get away of situations, they, for example, don't have like as good of personalities as their peers because they weren't encouraged to get like good personalities exactly because they can get away with only beauty, for instance. So what is the impact then? 3 things. Firstly, I think on the fact that it objectifies people and only reduces them to their physical characteristics, it is unjustified in and of itself. Secondly, it hinders self-actualization because you don't incentivize pretty people to actually prove themselves other than the fact that they're pretty. But then thirdly, I think there's going to be self-hatred when beauty is inevitably taken away from you, from your biological human clock, right? Because we're all humans and we all will eventually get wrinkles and etc. So then, we showed you how glorification of beauty and status quo harms all of the vulnerable people. So proud to propose.
I have second proposition speaker for that speech. Now I welcome second proposition speaker to continue the debate.
Timer. Okay. Okay. Start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Well, basically what we wanted about the beauty are is that how that you are going to be having interest to that meet of someone. I think in their side of the house is that people are not having the interest of talking to that person because, well, the first impression itself is not being implemented. First of all, let me clarify to you what is first impression. That basically when you're meeting someone and you're not going to be having much more closure or not going to be having contact or all of that anything. It is going to be bad because we basically, if we wanted to evaluating this person, if we wanted to be seeing this person, we need to be in much more closure, and that is going to be much more harder. Eventually, even that you are introverted, that you are wanted to going to be evaluating person, you cannot be doing that because you need to be able to be communicating. Oh, this person is kind, or this person is what, and being eventually that if there is a beauty, then you will having those interests to actually meet and talk to that person, and then. Yeah, and then about that they were talking about how the idolize itself is not going to be critic and all of that. This response is going to be cater on how the industrial needs is going to be able in our world. In this world is that the industrial needs is going to be. And going to be implemented seemingly that how the industrial have their own wanted to be beneficiable on how they going to be hiring those people in the beauty itself. Seemingly in your side of the house there is going to be that people that are going to be idols because they are not going to be having the first impression of that beauty at all. What you are going to be saying about idols and all of that is not going to be have exist in our in their side because, well, we're not going to be saying at the first impression itself. It's resembling to what? But how in our side that we wanted to make this beauty itself is going to be, no thank you, is going to be
as a symbolize for people itself, so that people could be united for it, so that there is a much more closeness. Because then we look at the Miss Universe itself, that you are presenting a diverse of beauty itself, seemingly that in our side of the house, that this beauty is going to be the golden minute, is going to be having the interest of people to actually be looking up on these issues, that being Miss Universe is going to be the telling to you. And because of that, we need this beauty, so actually could cater the most people in people that is going to be to actually giving that issues. And first of that, onto my arguments, is that how that the beauty itself, yes, it is come with a spectrum of how it is going to be first impression, of how their intonations, their physical, and all of that. Seemingly, in our side of the house, it is maintainedly a social construct that wanted you to always trying to perceiving nice to people, having your tone itself, talking to them is not how that you are going to be your look like itself. It needs to be need to be look good, not you are going to be seeing as
Boy,
yes.
exactly because the metric of beauty is so short that nobody can even prove the benefit of change in the first place. It gatekeeps people from expressing how good they actually are.
Yeah, I mean, in our side of the house, that we wanted to them to not going to be look not really not expressing their good and themselves. Because if you are going to not going to be not going to be preventing this beauty, you're just going to be look much more worse than before. They're not going to be having the burden to actually feel I need to be nice to this person. I need to be make this person to be able to be comforted with while they are going to be communicating with me. See that in their side of the house, people are just going to be apathetic about this. People are just going to be not having their own self-awareness, how they're going to be perceived in themselves. I think in our side also that there is some narrative of how it is okay when you're not going to be fitting beauty standard, but there is other traits, but it's okay that if I am smart or other like that, still that this kind of narrative is going to be much more in our side of the house to proven that how that they are the beauty stuff is still going to be justified. And then for that, the second one is about how that is going to be much more deterrence. Seemingly, what do we wanted to prove is that if you are going to be beauty and you're doing something is wrong, seemingly in our side, the deterrence effect will be more, because you are being expected as a beauty. If you're doing a cruel things to you, then the critic itself will be much more allowed in our side. The people that are being beauty itself will be having deterrence effect, saying that you are beauty, but why would you doing this and all of that like that. It will give to no thank you. It will give the resolve more deterrence to them, that they will not going to be replicated these actions into next kind of thing. Yeah, in itself that. Yeah, how that in our side of the house is not going to be like you are going to be putting your assessment to people, like you're going to be make this opinion to those people, and you're not degrading their values. Because in human minds also, you will be having those intrusive thoughts to actually saying that they are bad. But there are society itself, there are society that is going to be protecting how that if you are going to be delivering those intrusive thoughts, the society is going to be protected that the society is going to be neglecting all of that, because well, it is harm to the society. So still it is going to be just in your head about how would you evaluating person. It's not going to be implicated to that person as well. I mean, in our side of the house that we will be telling you about how this going to be much more caters in industrial needs, how that it will be much more efficient in our side of the house. Yeah, and how that in our side, people will actually wanted to be implemented, boosting their 100% on how will they going to be meet someone. You wanted to leave a good impression to that person itself, having a great, because if you are not going to be leaving those great impression, you're not going to be highly interested again to meet of those person. You're not going to be highly to having the interactions of that. Seemingly that in our side, beauty beneficiable as like that. And then beauty is going to be beneficiable as like that. And then how that is going to be make people to actually ensuring their own values about how would they going to be need to be how that is going to be highly on the self awareness itself is that people are going to be much given their first impression much more greater to that person because because they wanted because well the intrusive thought are not going to be delivered and they will actually be first impression is going to be great and you are going to be interested to that people. And first of all, what I have contributed to. First of all, I have contributed to you how the beauty is going to come in the spectrum in our side of the house is going to be on motivate someone to actually much more look good, much more to actually expressing themselves much more better because you need to actually express yourself in the first impression itself to 100% so that they will be having the interest to you. And then second of all, how that is deterrence will be affecting our side of the house. Similarly, we're not going to portray that they could just go away, they escaping with how they are beauty, but then because that they are beauty, the deterrence effect will be much bigger in our side of the house. And then third of all, how that is going to be not having the narrative, how it is not going to be justified that you are going to be assessment people to those people and not making conformance to them. And because of that, proud to op.
I second opposition for the remark. Now I call third opposition speaker to continue the debate. Hearing.
Am I audible? Sorry, trigger warning. I'm going to be talking about a few victims of this narrative. Right. In the film I, Tonya Harding injures her competitor to prevent her from competing in the next Winter Games. She did this because she was frustrated that every time she competed against her, that she would always lose to her because the judges would always see her competitor as more pretty, more aesthetic, as her moves to be more flawless even though they had the same skill. During the Black Lives Matter movement, when George Floyd was killed because of police brutality, the first thing that was questioned by society was he a criminal? Not whether or not the overreaching police brutality was justified or not. The urgency of our case is very clear, panels, because as so far as this narrative continues to exist, and as so far that people do not control their perceptions of others, that this beauty standards will continue to poison society, even in the most meritocratic of beliefs, such as sports and law, which is why the harms of their case is so clear. Vote for proposition. But firstly, 2 points of framing before moving on to my clashes. They try to tell you that people change and first impressions don't matter. Sure, but we don't think that is part of the debate, right? We already told you that we set the barrier, that this is a first impression, and we already told you that even if it's first impression, that it has overreaching harm, such as in the case of media, news, and societal narratives and whatnot. So they never engage on this. But second point of framing, then they're trying to tell you that the incentive for you to be better, the incentive for you to treat people nicely is so the other person would want to meet you. But again, we don't see how this is relevant to the debate when we already told you that these are like first impressions. These are people on the news, these are celebrities, which maybe you won't interact with, but which your perception of them will matter in the long run. So 2 points of clashes here. Firstly, whether it's justified to judge people based on standards of beauty, and secondly, on the societal impacts. They try to tell you that these standards as a check and balances both to society and to yourself. But what did we tell you under this? We already told you all the way from PM that you do not have epistemic access to determine whether or not somebody has reason to do what they did. You do not know whether someone is aggressive because they had trauma, because it's a defense mechanism, because of abuse. You do not have the access to know of the burden they are shouldering and why they choose to do what they do. And we believe that this is an unrealistic standard you set against them. But secondly, we also think that it's inhuman to yourself because you too are a victim of birth lottery. You too are a victim of societal beauty standards. You should not have the act. You should not be have to be perfect. You should not have to treat every stranger with the utmost beauty, with the utmost grace, because that is simply impossible. Because humans are imperfect beings. But thirdly, what are the impacts of these? We think that the impacts are simple, that you'll have horrible self-esteem, that you will see yourself as horrible simply because you don't treat the strangers on the street as like with your full grace or beautifully. We think that this is cause incredible harms to your own self-esteem, and this can lead to impacts such as like depression or even like suicidal thoughts. But why is this not even necessary? Well, if we can prove this, then we can basically negate all their benefits. Why is it not necessary that this check and balances exist? Firstly, we never get analysis on how society will suddenly crumble when these beauty privilege doesn't exist, right? How society will suddenly cannot function just because you're not nice to strangers on the street. But secondly, we already told you from PM and DPM how it's a form of discrimination. We already told you in multiple examples how this propagates societal narratives such as certain races are seen as aggressive, certain races are seen as no good just because they are not seen as conventionally beautiful. But thirdly, let's downscale their impact once again, because remember that this is the first impression. If you are rude to a stranger on the street, they won't remember you. They'll only see you as, oh, that person was rude to me. But the impact when you internalize this blame is could be for decades, because you think of yourself as always imperfect. You overthink that interaction multiple times, and it leads to more overreaching harms. Don't don't buy their case. But the second clash then about the societal impacts, they're trying to tell you that people on their side are still protected because people have other aspects, i.e., you can be seen as like smart, you can be seen as like funny. But notice panels, even if we take them at their best case, but we are asking people who are like not beautifully conventionally to be extraordinary, right? If you are not beautiful, then you have to be funny. If you are not conventionally beautiful, then you have to be smart. But why is this important, panels? Because you can be beautiful from birth, right? You can be beautiful without trying. Some people could just wear a towel and still look beautiful. But if you are smart, if you are funny, you have to make the effort. If you are smart, you have to make the effort to study every day just so that impression of you will stay. If you are funny, then you have to pretend to laugh at all the jokes about yourself and about your self-esteem, because to propagate that narrative, we think that this is unfair. But secondly, even then, what side opposition is championing is to value these people from only a certain aspect of their individual. We think this is bad because again, humans are multifaceted, and now you are reducing them to a stereotype. You are reducing them into something which maybe they do not want to be remembered as, and we think that this is like a horrible harm, because again, you are not letting individuals fulfill like their self-actualization in society. But secondly, they also told you that there are check and balances, that society will like check and balance you if you say something that's horrible to someone who's like not conventionally beautiful. Firstly, no analysis on this, and this came like no analysis on this. But second of all, I think we already like rebutted this from our like multiple examples how this is not true, right? Because we already told you from PM that just because the reasons are because of this conventional beauty standards doesn't mean that they like propagate beauty standards. This means that while people see like certain minorities as like less beautiful, they express it in a way that these minorities are aggressive, are rude. That is their justification. As such, even if there are check and balances, that you can't call someone, oh, they're ugly, but you can express it in a way that like justifies your like hate to them. And they never given us like a defense on this and how exactly they're justifying this on their side of the house. But like lastly, they also told you that this acts as a check and balances for like beautiful people, which is supposed to counter our DPM. I think DPM's extension still stands, because exactly when you know that you are protected by society, that no matter what you do, you will be still seen as perfect, as seen as like beautiful, that exactly that you have no incentive for you to become better, right? You have no incentive for you to treat others nicely, because you know that even without that, you can still survive in the world and people will still defend you. We don't understand how their analysis in this trumps our, when we already told you that in the current status quo, many idols, many celebrities are are defended for horrible acts just because they look conventionally pretty. Our path to victory is clear. We protect the most vulnerable actors. We protect individuals in the sense that they are allowed to self-actualize themselves, and we allow for society to be healthy. We allow for society to be less non-judgmental. So proud to propose.
I think third proposition speaker for the remark. Now I call third proposition speaker to close the subject part of the presentation.
Quick reminder, this is not reflecting my own perception or like whatever. This is just for the sake of competitive debate. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Opposition, your task is giving justification and how people would likely to decenter this narrative, not to oppose beauty standards in the very first place, right? This is out of the metrics of this debate. Exactly, it's not a symmetrical burden of proof to given to side opposition. Proposition. Your task is giving justification to the dissenter, not to oppose beauty standards. It is out of the metrics of this debate because exactly it's not a symmetrical burden. If you're giving side opposition to like, oh yeah, beauty standard is that bad. How would you fix this, etc. I think to reframe this debate, it does. This narrative doesn't influence this view into this narrative of centering, of influencing beauty towards the way you assess people. Is not the way. It's not the way that this view into a rational and professional way. It's like more like the way that you would give the deterrence in with weaponizing their beauty if they're doing something wrong, right? Whether they fit the standard or not. And proposition 2 seems to like not understand about the metric of refraining, right? You don't want to let anyone weaponize your physical beauty and let them exacerbate the problem that you've caused in the very first place. That's how it is so beneficial in our side of the house. You don't want to be told like, oh, you're pretty but your attitude is bad, or you're like not smart, etc., etc. It hurts you even more when the thing that you're building or when your selling point is like is like attacked in the very first place. That's how we want to people to give the deterrence or something to make them refrain themselves, right? But I think this motion is like you're not shifting other people way of thinking. It's just like you're shifting a narrative. Means that not everyone will accept this narrative in the very first place, and they don't prove to us why then it is still okay to not to let anyone have their kind of opinion then in their side of the house. Instead, proposition, they're still like, oh yeah, as long as you're pretty, you're going to be justified. I think no. Listen, this is not populist, but I think when someone are fully conscious about how they look and knowing that they're not as pretty as compared as to them, there will be like a likelihood of judgment, like a jealousy comes from within. In the status quo, you're not going to instantly like say, oh, it's okay, she's pretty, or for example, exactly because you don't want you don't want simply people are going to see them that way, right? It is like still a human nature to compete or etc. I think it's also happened in like less, but rather if she's going to do something wrong, blasphemy, considering how severe their action will also happen in our side of the house, and we have already told you why that weaponizing this are going to be just okay and giving them deterrence if it's like hurting more people and not justifying the beauty people do whatever they want, the one with the better birth lottery do whatever they want. This also happened like in like the less fitting beauty standards people, because you don't want them to be seen like, oh, you're not pretty and you're not smart. It means like you're not going to let yourself being determined it's going to be your physical appearance be the weaponized. That's what we want on side opposition, right? But I want to reframe this debate. It is like only the thing my first speaker has already told you that it's like just a thing that pops up in your mind when it is first impression or like the way you assess people in the long term, because it's not affecting the people's mark on that people permanently, unless the actions are so harmful, for example in the social media, etc. That's why the deterrence that we always talking about is like is so always be exclusive in our side of the house. They don't even engage with this. They're not charitable. But why would they want people to shift the way of assessment if they are standard in the very first place? Listen, this is not as this house prefers motion. Means that there's still beauty standard. There's still corporate that commands you to have this and that in your side of the house. And prove me likely on why people will adapt into this narrative, right? Welcome to Clash then. Which side of the house escalate to better self-awareness? I think why this clash is matter. Because first, we need an explicit solvency towards people because it's like individuals' view to another individual. Means like, the thing is making a good, which means we need to have a good feedback towards who receive it without changing the world's view and order in the very first place, because it is like unchangeable. The beauty standard existed like long decade ago, but it only, I think it only leads to cognitive dissonance or like echo chamber in your head, exactly because corporate and society still need you to look good. School even need you to look neat, for example, in the very first place. But the thing is, your closest people or like your best friend tell you like, oh, it's not that matter. And when you go with like a scrambled look for the corporation will rejecting you and etc. It hurts you even more because the echo chamber will always be like side to side in your side of the house later. I think on opposition, the fact that the corporation and society still have beauty standard, people's need are going to be like have a conflict. Even if you're saying like, oh yeah, it's an individual's motion, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't affect that much. But I think no, they are industry, they have demand, and like long decade ago, they have the standard in the very first place. This is not changeable into the narrative for the individuals, right? But this is not this proof of world motion, like how we've said to you. The point that it still exists and this action and proposal of the proposition still exists too, the industries are going to be more exploit and conquer the narrative because they have more capital than individuals' narrative on the society. They will say like, oh no, the beauty does matter, buy our product and etc. It will create more chaos. The thing you propose is not going to be received that perfectly before that, yes.
Remember that the metric for beauty is still prioritizes aesthetic value, which correlates with the mechanism to not give it to human instinct. For example, the fact that people still give benefit of the doubt regardless of how the situation's caliber, especially on the case of celebrities.
I think if you're not going to say why then if this beauty standard exists in your side of the house, people will adapt into this. People still would adapt into this narrative. You don't deserve to say that because exactly we're going to give you justification. We have proved to you justification then. Okay, on site still exist. Okay. They're more powerful than individuals. They're showing like their product on TV. They're showing like this and that on the TV. The thing you propose is not going to be received that perfectly in your side of the house in the very first place. To win this clash, opposition has to give us why people are willing to do so. That's their burden. Like it only happens if individuals are socialized with any positivity characteristic or like they're progressive enough to do so. And I think there are not so many in mass in the status quo, right? But welcome to the second clash then. Which side of the house justifies people's choice and respect them? I think on proposition, they're not justifying people's choice. You're going to be ashamed because you happen to use makeup and they think that's because you want to impress anyone. They said like, no, don't use makeup. You are if it's going to impress anyone and like that. You cannot do. You don't. And they say like you don't need to be pretty and like wearing this and that. I think this is problematic because you're now ashamed the people that happen to have like makeup or having a plastic surgery exactly because you don't want that to feel good about themselves. You're going to be seem like you're going to tease somebody or you're going to get ready to be assaulted by somebody rather than putting those art and respecting those art and self-appreciation on your face. That is highly problematic inside proposition. That's how we've already told you then why this will escalate the betterment of self-awareness because you still can and will be respected for for fitting beauty standards. We respect individuals' choice. Opposition.
Thank you all, third speaker for that speech. Closing off this case, I invite opposition to respond.
start my speech in 3, 2, 1. In our side of the house, that we have already been declared that beauty is going to be much more prominent in our side. Beauty is in our side itself is going to be used that it will going to be having much more deterrence effect to those people who are going to be escaping away with beauty. Basically, in our side of the house, they will be getting much more deterrence and even going to be not going to be replicated those actions again in the end of the day. And then second one, we have to clarify to you how that in our side of the house there are many narrative that's still not the many narrative that not going to be happen to going to be much more glorified on this beauty at all, because first of all we'll be telling you about how that is going there is many movement on beauty standard itself, even in the feminism itself, that projects that every woman is beautiful is going to be much more empowering to us, because woman itself will be having much more closeness, because it is going to be what them going to be symbolized, because that is exactly what happens into the into the woman itself, that they are going to be have feel represented on themselves, because well in diverse beauty of that out you make it into spectrum that beauty is diverse, that everything is unique, and by that and the third one and the second one about how that is not going to be having to assess people having their opinion to actually being inducted to that person. Seemingly that in our side of the house we have already been proven how that is not going to be happen, because there is a society that going to be neglect to it. Because of that, you're not going to be implemented your intrusive thought to actually say that this person is not going to fitting the beauty standard. No, there is still a norms and like that. And then and then their side is just how that is not going to be having much more symbolized. I mean, people who have their people are not going to be catered too much, because because people will not having any first impressions much more better in their side of the house. It's just like people just meeting someone, not leaving a great impression, or even that when they're wanting to do 100% to first impression to that person itself, they will be neglected by the society that telling that why when you wanted to be like the beauty, like doing makeup and other things like that, even if it's just going to be self-fulfillment, it's not going to be, it's just going to be much more critic in their side of the house, that people itself that doing seeing yourself pretty, seeing yourself beauty is going to actually making you having your self fulfillment itself, that seeing you are one of the beautiful creature, and because of that it is going to be much more make self fulfillment into you. And because of that in our side of the house we how that there is a narrative that is going to be protect how that beauty is going to be weaponized, that is going to be weaponized to actually you having the exclusivity because you are BTR out, not going to be happen. We have already proving that it is going to be making sure that people are not going to be having talking to having their own meeting someone and having the interest person to someone, because they're seemingly they in their side of the house it will be much more harder to even evaluating someone, or even wanted to having the interest on that someone, because basically they need to be much more evaluating, they will be much more going to be interact to those people. And even in the last point is that we haven't proven to you how that is going to be aligned with the industry demand, even that in this world itself the industry demand it is exists in both of our side of the house, seeming like using beauty as a symbol as itself to actually unite them, to actually going to be much more personally beneficial to the industry itself. And how that is going to be much more beneficial. And onto that we are having making sure that the beauty is going to be much more prominent in our side, how that is going to be much more symbolized, and because of that proud to
I thank all required for that speech, closing the entire debate without having prompts to reply. Thank you.
Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. In opposition, when your beauty is the main metric directly affecting and proportionate to how people perceive you, exactly prettier people would get more lenience because they don't have to work so hard to prove their worth, and instead, uglier people who don't suit conventional beauty have to work harder to prove their worth. In and of itself, you already disadvantage the people who are more vulnerable because of birth lottery, right? 6 mistakes coming from opposition. Firstly, their third speaker and reply literally brought out new matter, right? I don't think you should credit this because we can't even respond to it in reply. But then secondly, their third speaker also tried to tell you that our side doesn't fulfill the burden, that apparently we need to show the likelihood of how people are going to opt into this. But no, we just need to show why is it within the responsibility of individuals and why is it beneficial to do this in the very first place? Why does the benefits outweigh the harms, right? And so don't try to impose burdens to us that doesn't exist. But then thirdly, we told you the urgency in this motion is the fact that glorification and also human nature happens in status quo. And so the only way to counterbalance this is by actively decentering, right? Our side is the only one that gives you solution to inherent problems that happens in society. They try to tell you that people who wear makeup and plastic surgery in our side will be discriminated. No, because glorification literally happens, and also beauty is still respected in our side. It's just not so glorified. It is just not put on a pedestal. But then we think that in our side, at least when your personality, etc., is something that will be the main quality, it is good because at least you can change those traits, and people see that you're trying to change those traits, for example. And at best, I think that beauty becomes equal in our side. We don't dismiss beauty, right? But then fourthly, I think they misunderstood the motion. The fact that they try to tell you that jobs wouldn't exist and dress codes wouldn't exist. There aren't going to be people who are idols and people are going to wear certain clothes to schools and companies. This is just not true because beauty still exists as a metric, just not the main one. But then fifthly, I think this debate is very confusing, right? Because they keep on contradicting themselves. Because they tell you that, beauty give you interest to talk to that person. Then with this logic, then, you only are interested to talk to pretty people. You're not interested to talk to people who aren't conventionally attractive, because in your side, the interest that people have to talk to someone exactly is beauty. What is the delta then? I think in our side, when we don't give people the justification of having a first impression based on someone's looks, we think we give them the incentive to actually want to talk to someone, for example, because the looks of someone doesn't represent their personality and etc., right? But then lastly, they never engage to many of our analysis and extensions, and so I'm going to prove to you which ones are not engaged. Firstly, I'm going to talk about, is it justified for beauty to be the main metric? What did they tell you? They told you that it is justified because when you're beautiful, you're also suffering because people are going to scrutinize you. We already told you how, firstly, this is a halo effect in which that people who are beautiful are not going to be scrutinized as hard. But then secondly, in this logic, where even beautiful people are scrutinized, I think the delta here is people who are uglier are expected to put even more effort because it's the bare minimum, because they cannot prove themselves otherwise to their physical characteristics, right? But then, on the second issue on impact on society, we told you how beauty literally affects objective things that should be based on meritocracy, like jobs, law, and everything like that, but they never responded to this. What did they try to tell you? They try to tell you that, feminist movements and whatever will be more heard in opposition. We have already mitigated this because they totally misunderstood the motion. So then, how should you weigh this, panels? I think it is clear that on vulnerability, we don't submit people to birth lottery. We don't let people be literally exploited by beauty industries and cosmetic industries. But then secondly, on scale of impact, this narrative in your side of the house, this glorification literally impacts people starting from the young who are so vulnerable to old people who were subject to human biological clock. For all those reasons, so proud to propose.
Thank you, Prof. Thanks for that final remark. That concludes the last round, the last preliminary round of this NFPA 2024. Congratulations for voting for finishing all the preliminary rounds. I wish you all the best of luck for the result. This is a close round, a silent round, so you may all just leave this room, wait till the grab small and make the announcement.